reportedly posted a message on an internet bulletin board saying she was looking for someone to join her in committing suicide.
Local residents were in shock. There's been a foul smell for about 2 months.
I think that's even more shocking.
Japan is certainly known for its unique culture, from its food to its fashion. That's why, to some observers, it wasn't a complete surprise when human remains were found in the apartment of 27-year-old Taki Hirayashi. Neighbors had complained about the smell coming out of his apartment, and they knew that it weren't that stinky foreign cooking, because they were foreign too. As Hirayashi was led out to a squad car, an officer was overheard calling him a madman, to which he retorted, "I'm not mad at anyone." A man his friends described as quiet, gentle, and polite. An ex-girlfriend had described breaking up with him a year earlier and said that he'd hugged her and asked her not to go. But it finally looks like he found a way to make people stay. Hirayoshi had only recently opened a Twitter account and was calling himself Hanging Pro. And it was there that he'd start up conversations with vulnerable young girls, telling them that he could help ease their pain and making the offer, "Let's die together." And I'm guessing that when he said ease, he meant he was gonna rape and kill them. And when he said pain, he really meant he was gonna cut off their heads and drop them in a beer cooler full of kitty litter. Because police reports state that all the bodies had been decapitated and their heads were full of jizz. Jap jizz. And apparently, they weren't just skull fucked. The bodies were cut off so badly, they looked like a retard sushi chef had been making dinner with a chainsaw. It was egghead philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche who once pondered, is man one of God's blunders, or God one of man's blunders? Because I guess you gotta question any culture that makes a serial killer a hero. But it's not the first time that a maniac has spilled blood on sushi soil and become adored. There's S.A. Sagawa, who became infatuated with a pretty young Western girl who blew out her brains and ate her remains, but not before fucking her corpse. Or Nevada Tan, whose best friend pissed her off so she cut her head off in the middle of math class. And how could we forget Satomu Miyazaki, the rodent-hand pedophile who enjoyed raping his victims then cutting them up alive while he filmed it? Or the 14-year-old juvenile delinquent who led a 10-year-old retarded boy into the forest, cut off his head, fucked it, then stuck it on the gate of his school so his classmates saw it as they arrived for class. And let's not forget this handsome fuck, known as the shit-eater, Futoshi Matsunaga, who got his rocks off from killing women and kids and filming them while they ate his shit. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You can't make this shit up. And this isn't even the first half of the alphabet, but all of them have reached superstar status in Japan. And now we have skullfucker Taki Hirayashi to add to this esteemed group. So it seems that it's hard to escape the fact that Japan is a fertile breeding ground for serial killers with a unique flair all of their own. It must be the mercury and all that sushi that they eat. Because it seems clear that when Taki Hirayashi moved to a quiet suburb just outside of Tokyo, he had one intention. That was to kill. And with 9 victims and only 2 months of living there, there's one thing for sure. His lease wouldn't be renewed. They're funny about that sort of thing. It's now known that he had several different Twitter accounts to talk to young girls, and that his first 4 victims were all teenagers. Young and impressionable, he couldn't lose. because he told them he knew how they felt and that he was there to help. Then he'd bring them back to his place, offer them a soft drink laced with a date rape drug. Then he'd rape them and cut them up while they lay there paralyzed, watching as they were taken into the abyss. And not always in that order. And when the smell became offensive, he'd take them out of their plastic bags and drop them in a cooler of kitty litter.
The separation between clouds and mud.
And although Hirayashi's apartment wasn't very big, because none of his victims had been reported missing, I guess he just couldn't help himself. And he turned the place into a killing floor. In Japan, it's considered shameful to report a kid missing, and for parents, it's better to suffer in silence and hope that your kids just run away and are still safe. No one's quite sure how Yusuke Kanagawa ended up on the coroner's list. I guess some serial killers swing both ways. The killer claims that Kanagawa begged him on Twitter to assist with his suicide, and that him killing him and chopping him up were purely charitable and that there were no sex involved. But forensics disagreed and said that Taki Hirayashi was just as generous with his jizz on the boys as he was with the girls. Liar, liar, pants on fire, jizzing in what you desire.
If you take action, it will become.
But it was Hirayashi's ninth and final victim that would be his downfall. 20-year-old Akiko Tamura had regained consciousness while the hangman was sawing off one of her legs. And though she tried to escape, it's kinda hard when you're missing a leg. Hirayashi had to strangle her so tight that one of her eyes popped out. And when she didn't come home that night, her brother got worried. And even though the parents said, leave her alone, cause she's a big girl now, but the brother had a gut feeling, and he went on her Twitter account and started poking around, and it led him straight to the hanging pro and seeing all the messages between him and his sister. Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on, and he called the cops. Easy, easy, Japan, easy. When cops showed up at his front door and knocked, he calmly answered and invited the officers in for a cup of tea. Probably Jap tea. One of the officers on the scene described the apartment as a killing floor, with random body parts placed around the apartment. Police recorded that Hirayashi had been eating a sardine sandwich and watching television. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. And that he'd said very little to him, except for all his victims had wanted to die, so he committed no crime. Which I guess is hard to argue. And as for cutting up the stiffs, what else are you supposed to do with bodies stinking up your living room? And when asked by investigators where one of the victims' heads were, he just pointed to a bucket and said she's over there.
I cannot believe he can do such a thing.
When investigators asked Hirayashi what his angle on the caper was, the unemployed gamer answered greed. Basest coin there is. It was all for the money, robbing each of his victims after he killed them. And if this latest tragedy is anything to go by, just when we think we're running out of interest in Japanese serial killers, the land of the rising sun provides.